Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I've just now gotten around to making my second Divine Ire character for the League, and this time around it is Divine Ire Ignite Elementalist, using the Stormfire ring that lets your lightning damage then burn. Ever since we first saw the preview for Divine Ire, what it looked like as a laser beam, and then of course the actual gem info, I kind of figured this looks like it's going to be insane with Stormfire, but I wasn't going to try and commit into making that character on the very first character around, because it feels like it would have been quite clunky since you can't actually get a Stormfire on until level 80. At this point I did grind out a bunch of levels up until level 80, trying my best to be some sort of jank Ignite build, and eventually we got a Stormfire on at level 80, and holy shit is this some serious Ignite damage. The numbers that this is putting out is the biggest Ignite I've had since all of the double dipping nerfs, and it's the smoothest feeling Ignite too. All you gotta do is charge up a little bit of a laser beam for every pack, and things will easily die to all of your burn prolif, and then drop a 20 stack Divine Ire when you need to against the big enemies, and you can see that they melt pretty goddamn efficiently. So Divine Ire seems to be a very insane carrier of the Ignite, and you can see there's a lot of green stuff all over the screen right now as opposed to the usual red, pinkish sort of burn prolif. That's because the Cinder Swallow Flask is the mastermind drop that comes off of Katarina, and she does a shitload of green fire everywhere. Well, they seem to have changed it this patch, that if you have the flask up and you're burning with it, then you have green fire instead of whatever you previously had. So that's why it looks like there's a lot of acid / poison type stuff. It's still our fire, it's still burn, and it's still a very effective burn, as you can tell. Running this double beyonded shaped sextanted crater map, just firing off a beam of Divine Ire, leaving some prolif, kills just about bosses as soon as they spawn, and that is rather nuts. And I've done a lot of double beyond on this character so far because it's just been so effective at getting fast, easy, and extremely fun XP. Now I will go over the entire character setup, how to level it, and how it actually functions at the end of the video, but if you're unfamiliar with Stormfire, it simply basically lets you have your lightning damage do burn damage. So instead of your burn only being based off of pure fire damage to begin with, you can instead base your ignites off of your lightning hits. And in this case it's Divine Ire. It is a pretty large lightning hit to begin with, and then your burn damage is scaling from that initial hit. So you have to scale a lot of lightning damage to get your initial hit rather high, and then also fire damage to actually scale the burn portion of your skill, because doing this whole Stormfire interaction doesn't make your ignite damage lightning. It's still fire. Ignite damage and burn is always going to be fire. It's just based off of the lightning. So then both lightning damage and fire damage helps increase your burning damage at the long run, and it's been very effective for a few characters at this point, building into Stormfire, but mostly with attack-based builds. Previously I've done things like Burning Arrow, Doriani's Fist. Then this is probably the first one I'm doing as a spellcaster, because just previous to this I don't think I've really had any great spellcaster lightning interaction ideas, but Divine Ire absolutely screamed Stormfire use, and this is me doing my highest level depth so far in Delve, level 83, depth 300 or something, and the burn prolif is just so effective for this shit, it's actually quite insane. And this is an elementalist, but I think the best version of the character should probably be a trickster. That said, I have already made 3 tricksters this league, and I'm not just going to keep churning out tricksters. That's going to be up to you guys. If you want to make this as a trickster entirely, your choice. I think it is going to be slightly more effective because it'll shield charge around faster, it'll cast faster, and it also has that big chunky regen that you get from the Patient Reaper node. We do get that from the Mastermind Flask as an Elementalist, but of course it is situational for your Flask being up, and it's a little less effective than the Trickster node as well. Granted, you could as a Trickster double up on that regen and use both the Mastermind Flask, and that node as well. Damage should be a little less on the Trickster version, I think, but it should still be plenty enough to actually get through all of this content. Because as you can see, our single target is actually rather nice, and all it takes is one burn. So charge up your 20 stacks, hit one burn on the enemy, and just run around playing it somewhat defensive and somewhat safe from there on out. Because the one burn should be enough to take out just about any boss or any boss's phase that I've at least come across up till now. Tier 11 Elder, Uber Itziri, and I think by the end of it we will be doing Uber Elder pretty damn smooth, phasing each one of his phases, or 25% zones, with just a single burn. So the playstyle should be rather nice there too. And at the end of the day, it is a pretty budget build too. You can scale it to the absolute maximum and get a little bit more damage out of it, but all you really need is a Stormfire, and then the gear around that is actually pretty basic, and there's not that much you can do to min-max. You can just a little bit. It's mostly going to be down to like Watcher's Eyes, maybe a few weapon crafts, but let's say a basic version will have, I don't know, 700,000 burn damage. A really beefed up, souped up version with lots of currency invested, it's going to have something like 1 million. So you're talking an effectiveness of maybe 30 to 40%, just for the sake of spending a shitload more currency. And I'm trying my best to keep it on a little bit of a budget, but also min-max it to its extremes. So you can see this is an Uber Itziri run, and that was a very smooth ignite right there against the bosses. And this is still on level 19 gems, still leveling up at level 89 or 90, I think. And I don't usually tackle endgame content quite so haphazardly, so brazenly. I like to wait till all of my gems are level 20 and all my gear is fine-tuned. But this one, well, it just seems to be going so well that I figure, why the hell not? And you can see that one other little perk of the Elementalist is that we are reflect immune, so I can attack the mirror all I want and take absolutely 0 damage. Doesn't really come in handy too often, but every now and again against Itziri or maps, it is pretty nice as a perk. So I'll show you what the character looks like and how it currently functions. So here's my character, currently level 90, called Omega Hole. It's just an emote in our chat at the moment. At this point, I think it should be pretty quick, but 17 hours, not too bad, having done a bunch of the end game already, and a lot of crafting in the town as well. Now, as I mentioned, the character is based entirely around the Stormfire ring. What it says is your lightning damage can ignite. So instead of your ignite being based off of only fire damage, it can now be based off of the lightning hit of Divine Ire. So you can see that my Divine Ire currently has 2,000 to 4,000 lightning damage, no fire damage whatsoever, and then we get a bunch of burn when I hit with my lightning damage. You do of course need chance to ignite and actual ignite scaling for it to do anything. So my Divine Ire currently over here does have 103% chance to ignite, and then of course we are using some actual ignite gems like Combustion, which scales the burn portion of our skill here, 28% more fire damage, then also gives additional chance to ignite, minus fire res to the enemy, which is pretty damn good. Deadly ailments, you have infused channeling, which increases the damage of our Divine Ire. Fizz to lightning, which converts half of our fizz into lightning, and then gives us additional lightning so that we are then pure lightning. And of course, burn damage support. So that's currently the 6 link. And if you're only rolling a 5 link, then probably take out burn damage, I suppose. But probably run a 6 link no matter what, even if you have to run a tabular. Now you can't actually get this entire good ignite interaction until Stormfire, which is level 80. So that does pose a bit of a problem, and that's why at level 20 you chuck on 2 Call of the Brotherhoods and then a 3 Dragons Mask at level 35, and all of a sudden you have 80% of your lightning that is now cold, and your cold can then ignite. So you are already sort of a budget version of the build right from level 35 up until level 80, and you can start taking passives on the tree that give you ignite damage, ignite percent chance, and using the Elementalist Ascendancy. As well as that, at level 38, you probably want the Ignite Proliferation Support Gem, because you won't actually have your Ignite Prolif until you get your Cruel Lab done. And if you are a Trickster version of this build, then you want to be using Ignite Proliferation Gem full-time permanently. And that is this gem over here. Guess I should have probably busted it out for you guys. This gem over here, it does deal more damage with ignites and also has the same sort of interaction that Beacon of Ruin has. And it's still a pretty good gem, so you shouldn't feel bad about using it in your Trickster setup, all while leveling the Elementalist version. But as an Elementalist, you do want to try and get to this as soon as possible, and then ditch that as soon as you can. And by level 80, you put on Stormfire, and your damage and clear and all that should just about double. So this will be an effective enough setup. It will feel pretty good, but once you get this on, you feel like an absolute god when it comes to damage comparatively. So it becomes pretty insane. So that's the main basis of the entire build, the Stormfire ring. But there are a few other things that you can do to make things better for yourself, like making an implicit synthesized Void Scepter with 20% faster burn damage. For the actual defenses and sort of build of our character, I'm using a Devouring Diadem, which gives you Eldritch Battery. That is this over here. So it saves you a couple of points technically, but it also gives you a very nice amount of sustain, because Feast of Flesh every 5 seconds consumes some corpses, and that regens a lot of your energy shield, and that really helps to sustain your Eldritch Battery. So it's not strictly necessary, but it is very nice if you're going to try and build it the same way with Eldritch Battery, but you don't have to. You can go pure life based. You can run a Combs, for example. You could run a Staff in that case as well. You could use a Elder Helm, which uses burn damage support, and something like an Essence Craft. You could also run a Trickster version that does Mind Over Matter with mana instead of Eldritch Battery. I think that could be an easier and more effective way of building, but you do grab Mind Over Matter and Eldritch Battery from here. So our defense does mean that whenever we get hit, a lot of the damage will go towards your energy shield, but it does mean that if you run out of energy shield, you can no longer cast, and that does get a little bit annoying. So you do have to play a very dodge and evasive sort of playstyle. And this is the new microtransaction for Divine Eye. If you haven't yet seen it, just thought I'd show that off. Plenty of red going on there. So that's currently what I'm doing with my build, Eldritch Battery, and it does have better reservation, so I can then run Herald of Purity, Enlighten level 3, Malevolence, and Herald of Thunder, and that gets me most of my reservation there. But I've also got room for an aspect of the spider this way, and that's 100% of my reservation that way, and I put that on the amulet. As far as importance goes, Malevolence is the only really good one, and Herald of Thunder actually gets pretty good if you're running one of these Circle of Regrets, which cost me something like 50C. It's good, not that insane, but if you can get your hands on one, it's worth doing, especially if you're running Herald of Thunder. Besides that, the gear is pretty basic. There's nothing too special to mention. Faster casting on gloves is nice just for some quality of life, and trying to get some cast speed on my shield, as well as some energy shield and life. And I tried to get energy shield life wherever I could, as well as a bit of chaos resist, because capping my res was actually pretty easy. And then if you want maximum damage, physical damage at extra lightning on your amulet goes a bit of a long way too. So as far as this scepter is concerned, it's gonna be about the same output as a scepter that is shaped and has physical as extra lightning, because that is a large stat for us, and you can get up to 20%. However, the implicit here is 20% faster ignites. Now, it may be a bit confusing. How do you actually get one of these? Basically, you just need to get 3 scepters that have the fractured mod of increased burning damage, and they have to total 71 or higher. So when you synthesize your fractured items at that point, it will randomly choose from the pool of mods you have on your items, and then give you an outcome based off of that. If you've only got things like burning damage on your scepter, so let's say you grab a scepter with the burning damage fractured mod, and then scour it, and then regal it, you then have burning damage and whatever the regaled mod is. Let's say you have that on all 3 of your scepters. Once you combine your scepters, you will have a 50-50 chance of getting either the burn damage to become the implicit if it's over 71 of this, or whatever the hell else is on that with the regals. So if you want to guarantee it, you have to regal, you have to scour down to burning damage, regal something random, annul the nothing, and then just remain burning damage. It's not really worth it. Just grab a few scepters out there with burn damage, totaling 71, scour, regal, and then you get a 50-50 chance of making one of these. And it's not even that worth making one of these. Just a shaped one is going to be just as good, and ultimately you get a few good rolls on there, like cast speed, some lightning damage to spells would go nicely, and then it's going to be basically the same thing. So if you want to avoid that altogether, the entire synthesized mechanic, that's fine, you can. It's not that good anyway. It's just an option as far as I'm concerned for this sort of shit. Ultimately as well, you can also use a disintegrator if you really want. It's got, as you can see, a bit more damage than my current setup. So my setup has 780k ignite. If you chuck on a disintegrator, puts us at 1,000,000, but you then of course take some degen, you then don't have as good cast speed, energy shield, all of that, and you can even just dual wield these sorts of scepters for a very similar outcome to a disintegrator, but none of the downside, and a lot more cast speed. So that's entirely up to you, but a real good strong budget option to start with is a disintegrator. You can go into higher ones like this. You can make a shaped scepter as well, and then there's going to be quite a lot of fine tuning you can do to scale your own shit in this build. And the only other real thing you can do to scale is get a Malevolence Watcher's Eye, which says damaging ailments you inflict deal 15% faster while affected by malevolence. Same sort of thing as this one, just gonna give you an increase in your DPS for Ignite. And then as well as that, it doesn't actually come up to start with when you get these mods. You have to edit it in yourself. So I just went into the item here, just hit edit, and then edit in ignited enemies burn 20% faster, because the actual mod here ignites you inflict, deal damage 20% faster, doesn't register on POB. So change it the same way as I did there, and you'll see your real DPS in POB. Likewise with Watcher's Eye, ignited enemies burn 15% faster. So yeah, something like this amount of damage is what I currently have, 780, and my previous Ignite builds had something like 500, 600k at best, and this also doesn't factor in the shock that we get from Elementalist. So Elementalist gives a guaranteed 20% shock, and it's also scaled by shock effect, which I have plenty of. Got shock effect here, 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 a little bit around here, got a bit over here and here. And ultimately that means that my guaranteed shock of 20% is more like 30 to 40% against even the biggest bosses like an Uber Elder. So you can take my damage that is almost 800k and make it something like 1.2 million instead. So that's why Elementalist is better for damage. Trickster is probably going to be better for overall playstyle and safety and all that, but if you want the max damage and a bit more prolif action, then go for this. Otherwise, you can get the Trickster happening. Now, something that's important to mention is you do want Elemental Equilibrium as fast as you can, because every single time you're going to hit with your skill, you are going to make the enemy weak to fire damage, and that is the entirety of your damage from the burn. So Elemental Equilibrium is pretty important, and rather importantly, you cannot get any fire damage on your skills. So if, for example, this scepter had added fire damage to spells, it would ruin my elemental equilibrium and it would make me deal much less damage. So be careful that you don't have any additional fire damage anywhere. That's why we can't run Herald of Ash or Anger or anything like that, because it will screw up your elemental equilibrium, which is a very large part of our damage. As far as the rest of the links go, we have, let's say over here, Elemental Weakness, Orb of Storms, Curse on Hit, and Crit Strikes. So place down the Orb of Storms every now and again. It will help proc your Elemental Overload and also give you Elemental Weakness. We then do have a second curse in Witchfire Brew up whenever we use it. You have Cinder Swallow Urn, which gives you a bunch of extra sustain and some damage as well. I do recommend using this one, especially if you're an Elementalist. Trickster has a similar sort of passive though. I'm then running Faster Attacks, Shield Charge, and Fortify. Not sure it's the right move, but it feels okay. For the most part, you can go pure Flame Dash if you'd rather, which I have over here. Faster casting, Flame Dash. And then I do run Blood Rage as well sometimes. It's a bit faster, but it is way more dangerous because you won't be regenning Energy Shield, and you're basically just straight up degenning it always. And you then are running a very risky playstyle with Devouring Diadem being most of your sustain for Energy Shield. All in all, it is a rather confusing build if you're not used to the Stormfire interaction, because, for example, you can't take spell damage. It doesn't help your ignite damage. So we're going for cast damage, elemental damage, fire damage, and lightning damage. You then also get some burn damage. But once you understand how Stormfire works, play around with POB and you'll understand what's going on there and how it actually functions, and it becomes kind of simple. Not too simple, but you do understand what's going on, and it's not all that hard. Basically, lightning damage, treat it as if it's fire damage, but you've still got another stat you can scale, lightning damage, and then you just focus on the back end, which is your burn damage, and most of that is coming from all of these supports and all of that. So it's a bit confusing. Hopefully you understood it. I think this is currently one of the best Ignite builds you can play out there, and one of the juiciest versions of Divine Ire. It's very fun. I absolutely love the skill, and I absolutely love Prolif burning everything around. So I do recommend giving it a shot if you haven't tried some Divine Ire, or even if you have, want to play some more and want something a little bit different. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.